Ms. Wang here in Beijing. What do you make of this debate going on in the UK, observing from China?
Well, actually, as far as I know, this is still an ongoing debate, and if this will really happen in the future is still a question mark. And but I understand the goodwill behind this policy and assumption. Actually, that echoes the policy that was also adopted by Conservative Party in 1992. That is by offering more choices and diversities to give the children more opportunities and access to equal access to education. But on the other hand, we have to remember that the education quality is largely also associated with the socioeconomic status. And unless the socioeconomic status were changed and also were distributed more equal, and then the students' performance in whichever school they will be enrolled in might not change very much.
So if I could sum up in one sentence what you have just said, whether it's grammar school or not, if some of the basic root causes causing the gap have not been addressed, then there's no way it can be fair education. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go to Dr. Li in Hong Kong. What do you think? Do you agree with Dr. Wang here in Beijing? She seems to suggest a very long process, but of course, educational reform has to be done all the time.
Well, good evening, Tianwei, and also Wang Yan. Well, I think that's a really good question. And the reintroducing of the grammar schools, I think probably we should look at a little bit more background information about that. From the very beginning, grammar schools focus on Latin studies. So, and in other words, that means that not the ordinary people can afford to go to that school. And in 1944 and later in 1947, the whole British Kingdom has endorsed the proposal for the grammar schools nationwide. And at the very beginning, people thought that could be a way to equalize educational opportunities for everybody. But later on, it gradually turned out that the grammar schools actually divide kids into, using David Cameron's word, into different shifts and goals. In other words, that's different classes. So actually, since 1960s and 70s, people argue against that the benefit of the grammar school, and they expand for new schools to be established by Tony Blair in 1998. But this time, I think the new PM intended to focus on the educational qualities. So she tried to reintroduce the system.
I see.
But I'm not so optimistic about that intention to bring
Dr.
quality into...
Right. Dr. Liu, I think
Yes.
you just mentioned the key word to your overall answer, that is the quality of education, whether it's called grammar school or non-grammar school or secondary school, whatever it is. So in the proposal, is there any specific content that would make you feel the quality of education likely to be increased? Will that quality of education increasing, suggested by the proposal, address to the overall population of those in the age of education, or likely to be only selective groups? I think that are the key issues. Those are the key issues. Dr. Li.
Well, I think, well, it's always a dilemma, actually an ethical dilemma for policymakers to make a good judgment in balancing quality and equality. Well, if, let's say, if a state can provide a very, very good quality of education, but it's not accessible equally to everybody in the country, so what does that mean to the country and to the society as a whole? So that's always a dilemma for any country, actually.
Right.
And in China, if we look at into our own system, we will see we can reflect on the key school system. Actually started from 1953 in early times and stopped for 10 years during the Great Cultural Revolution. And it was reintroduced in 1978 by Deng Xiaoping, because that's the time that we really need talents to build up the country. And that's a specific time we have to
right.
take the very practical considerations for that.
Oh, Dr. Wang, it seems that Dr. Li is suggesting at different times we have different priorities. So at times, sometimes we should have the key school or grammar school. Other times, well, maybe equality is more important, so let's have something like the secondary school. Do you agree?
Well, I think in the case of UK, actually, it's not a matter of choice, but it's a result of this kind of two-party political system. And
But the reason why we are debating about this issue is not necessarily we want to point out what the UK should do, but rather this as an interesting case study for all educations around the world on the issue of equality vis-a-vis quality, on the issue of priorities. I think this is the key.
Well, yeah, there are two kinds of policy designs or policy schemes. One is this kind of like a neighborhood enrollment policy. All the children are obliged to enroll in the school in the neighborhood. And then we have this kind of students, they can enter into the schools that they choose by their performance in the competitive examinations. Each of these two types of policies have their own pros and cons. In the later case, it will definitely drive the examination-oriented teaching or education. For example, in the UK, in a similar reform, say like two decades ago, one of the consequences is the more teaching to the test in the classrooms and in the schools. And then in the first case, when these students, they are obliged to go to the school that they might not choose if they could. And then there is also the problem that the students don't like these schools and they could not find the subjects or teachers or the courses that fit into their interests that could actually undermine their potential development.
Yeah, there's always the dilemma over there. And then, Dr. Li, if the UK, for whatever reason, whether you call it political or social, eventually adopted this school system, grammar school system, would that send any message to other educational systems around the world? Dr. Li?
Yes. Can you say that? Ask your question again, please.
Oh, my question is very simple. That if the UK did what Prime Minister May proposed, grammar school, does that send any specific message to educational systems around the world?
Well, I cannot get your point clearly, but probably I would say that in the world there is no perfect system that can take both. I mean, quality and equity. So as said, it's always a dilemma, and it's about how we measure quality and by what. In the UK system, that's 11 plus, the so-called 11 plus examination actually is based on the intelligence of students' potentials. But does that mean all about students' potentials? And in China, we use Gaokao to filter students get into universities. And that's also, we have criticized that a lot over years.
Right.
So that's also a question for us. How to define the quality and in what sense and for what purpose.
Okay, you still raise the questions rather than answer the question. That also once again shows the complexity of the question. So, Dr. Wang, what do you say? Does that send a message if the UK really go back to grammar school system?
Yes, I think it really makes sense and could convey some message to the world. One thing is that this kind of high-stake examination by competition to enter into the high-achieving or top-performing schools could work, because there is a lot of controversy against this kinds of high-stake examinations, like the case in China, and that could really drive the examination-oriented education. And on the other hand, this kind of system actually according to the empirical study, has been proven to be the most fair system in the world, because only in that system students can get opportunity to enter the best school or top performing schools by their performance. So once again, this I think would convey a message that this could be a policy choice that as a kind of like pursuit for the equity.
Well, Dr. Wang, I want to continue by asking a little bit about that, because the reason many people argue against grammar school system or the so-called key school system as being used in China is because they are arguing for diversity. They're arguing for capabilities of students beyond academic scores and achievements. So that addresses us to the fundamental question of what is the purpose of education. At least what is the purpose of education during the middle school and the high school period of time. So what do you think as an educator about this ever debated fundamental question, particularly now?
Well, the purpose of education, well, you know, there is a very popular Chinese saying like that's the mission of the teachers. Very lofty mission is the engineering of the human soul. So
well, that's a slogan, but is the slogan really the reality?
Slogan.
That's another issue, right? But Dr. Wang, don't let me interrupt your answers.
Okay,
Go ahead.
sure. This actually explains what education is mean, what kind of purpose education is meant to serve. And so as the educators or the schools, their responsibility is not only to impart knowledge, but also more and more we're talking about competences, the 21st century competences like interpersonal competencies and interpersonal competencies, etc.
Right.
And whatever schools that will be developed or built in the case of the UK, I think these schools will all face the same challenge.
Right.
They have to transform the teaching content and the way that they deliver this knowledge and skills to the students, so that students can master or grasp these kind of competences. But that could be very difficult to assess.
Well, tell me about the difficulties. I mean, every family has, relatives and friends, children who are facing exactly the dilemma that you're talking about, Dr. Wang. Let me go to you, Dr. Li. China also, we face this constant challenge of what kind of educational system we want and what kind of test system are we going to have, what does that mean for the quality of education. Just one recent example, Dr. Li, is that the middle school entrance exam is likely to be abolished from its original form, but rather with some interesting new introductions. Earlier, there were talks about and practices about students having different kinds of talents. For example, sports, culture, music, many other things can be added with extra points when having this kind of exams. And now that is likely to be abolished in the very near future. So we see these dramatic changes in educational policy and also exam entrance policy constantly, shall we say, not only in China, elsewhere as well. Every 5 years, every 10 years, and every 20 years. Should we have more consistent policies? Or actually, ever-changing policy is likely to benefit us because the circumstances have also changed? I throw you a very big question, a long question, but I think I should set the stage very well before you answer it. So go ahead, Dr. Li.
Well, actually, that's a very good question, and I got the point. That's very important for policymakers to think about. In the short run, probably we would desire kind of more consistent policies for educational reforms. But if we look at back to the history, we will see educational reform just like swinged from left to right and from right to left again and again like a pendulum. The reason is, as you actually pointed out, it's because of the changing societal context and conditions, and we have to find good ways to respond to that kind of challenges, especially in nowadays the radical globalization, commercialization of education, and the digitalization of education. All these combine together to serve kind of a very strong force. And our policymakers must address these challenges. In terms of educational missions, I would consider that's actually multiple. We cannot use a narrow-minded perspective to look at educational missions. I don't mind students to be weaponed with a lot of very practical skills and can find a job right away after graduation from universities. For example, be a very good, competent engineer or a teacher. That's of course very good. But to me, I would feel education, the fundamental mission for education is to unfold the younger generation's potentials and also humanities. That's very, very important.
Okay.
We could have a very evil-ish scientist who work on nuclear weapons to destroy human beings, the Earth. So that's, to me, I feel is even more urgent in the new era.
Dr. Wang, before we go, 30 seconds for you.
Okay.
The world is changing so fast. People are saying educational system is so much lacking behind. Are we just trying to struggle a little bit, but actually it doesn't make sense, whatever we tried or whatever new policies we are trying to adopt?
Well, I think most of the comments that were saying that education is lagging behind, well, I would say half of them are from the education field, but most of them are from are made by taking outsider perspective. Because if you actually look at the process that happened in China, actually we have been going through a very intensive, quick and small-paced step of the reforms. So many things has been done, many reforms have been made, and tremendous progress has been made.